Hello, this Saturday it is the 68th European Cup final between Inter Milan and Manchester City. Delighted to say in the studio with me for the game is former England goalkeeper Paul Robinson and a man that helped Leeds get to the semi-finals of this competition back in 2001. Paul, it's a massive game for both. Inter, of course, going for their first Champions League since 2010 when they won the treble. Manchester City going for their first ever Champions League and in doing so will also win a treble. What a game we have.
That's an incredible game, and I think there's a lot of people that have said that City have been nailed on for this treble for a long time. Since they won the league, there was no people where you were looking and you were thinking, who's going to stop them? You know, United in the FA Cup final, it was a good game, but Inter, listen, you can't write this Inter Milan team off. They've got a very good cup pedigree under Inzaghi, and listen, they've knocked Barcelona out of this year's Champions League as well from the group stages. They're going to be a difficult task for Man City. We know the attacking prowess that City have got. Inter won't come out and play open, expansive football against them. It's going to be a real game of chess. City like to play against teams that come out and try and high press them and, you know, play attacking football against them because they pick them off. Inter won't do that. It'll be a really interesting game, this really will.
OK, let's do a deep dive into the game then. We'll start off with Manchester City. No surprise, they are the clear favourites. They've dominated domestically. Of course, they're on for the treble. They've won the Premier League and Cup double. They swept past Real Madrid, past Bayern Munich to get here as well. They've only lost one of the last 27, and that was against Brentford when they changed the side, and they'd already won the league. So it really is a rock-solid case, isn't it, when you're presenting City to win this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you'd argue they're the best team on the planet at the moment, but it's a one-off game. And I mean, we've seen them, they have had their flaws this year. They've lost at home to Brentford. There's games that they have struggled in. Inter Milan will look at this City team and, going forward, they almost look flawless. But there are holes in this City team. There's imperfections, if you like. But what they do lack in the tiny little imperfections they've got, they can more than doubly hurt you at the other end. But like I say, it's a one-off game. You look at City's record in this year's Champions League. They drew at home 0-0 to Copenhagen. They drew in Dortmund 0-0. I mean, the group stage I went through okay. But their first game in the last 16, they drew with Leipzig. So there's hope for Inter Milan here. There's not this City side. Yes, they do look formidable, but it's not some clear cut, I don't think, as the bookies make out. I make City the clear favourites, I do. I think they'll win it. If I had some money to put on, I would put on City to win. But I think there's a really strong case that you can make for Inter Milan in this game. OK, well, let's perhaps do that then, because it's obvious talking about how good City are. Yeah. It's hard to find the weaknesses in them. So let's look at the positives for Inter Milan. They've won 11 of the last 12. You mentioned that great record that they've got in the Cups. And in the Champions Leagues, they've not been conceding goals either. No, they're tight at the back. And what City will come up against, that they won't regularly come up against, is a front two. Inter play with a back three, not a back five. They'll play three at the back, five in midfield, and a front two of probably Martinez and Dzeko. And it's a different formation as to what City are used to. And I think the problem that City might have is been swamped in midfield in the wider areas. If City do play with that back three, we've seen what he does with Stones in that pivot position. Away against Real Madrid, he dropped John Stones further deeper and he played with a back four rather than a three and Stones in the pivot. So it depends what City do. I think they'll play the slightly more defensive formation. I think personnel will be the same. I know we're going to talk about it in a minute, but the personnel is interesting, but the formation ever so slightly changes when they're away from home where he wants it slightly more defensively. But this Inter Milan team, like you say, they always play a 3-5-2. Third in Serie A, inconsistent this year, but they've picked up 2 domestic trophies this year under Inzaghi. They picked up domestic silverware last year under Inzaghi and finished second in the league. Listen, it's in comparison to paper to Manchester City, yes, they are inferior, but you look at what they've done. They've knocked out Porto, they've knocked out Benfica, they've knocked out AC Milan, they've put Barcelona out in the group stages. So there's a reason they're in this final, and it really is going to be a cracking game. There is an argument to be made for them.
Yeah, just to add to that, they've kept 5 clean sheets in the last 6 Champions League games as well. So they've got that know-how, how to get through. And you look at Inzaghi as well, going back to his days with Lazio. He won the Italian Cup there and he won 2 Super Cups in 3 years. So he's not a mug. He knows exactly what to do on Saturday.
He seems to be like a cup specialist, if you like the 2 cups this year as well. And they're a team coming into this in form. They've won 11 of the last 12 in all competitions that they've played. So I know it's a one-off, but they're a team that are coming into this with form. So those of you out there that do like value in your bets, there is going to be some value in Inter. There really is.
Yeah, by the way, that one game they didn't win in that 12-game span was away to Napoli. No shame in that.
Who cruised the league.
and they had a man sent off at 0-0. So
Yeah.
you can almost scratch that result off.
There's going to be value in here. I mean, you look at the in-game betting as well. Inter could nick a goal. You could back Inter to win. Inter could nick a goal with a goal scorer. And then you look at your cash-out options and other things. The in-game betting is going to be quite busy around this one, I think.
I think we've done our best to scare City fans, haven't we? Really putting the case up for Milan.
You have to make a case to them because they're in the Champions League final for a reason. Like I say, domestically inconsistent this year, but cup competitions, they're there and they're there for a reason. And you look at the players that they've got: Barella, Brozovic, Martinez, Dzeko. Mkhitaryan may play, for the Manchester United fans out there that we know. They have got a good 11, 12 starting players that they've got to pick. And on their day, there'll be a good game for City. They will.
OK, let's get stuck into the team selection and the tactics. We'll start off with Manchester City. Of course, the big question going into it, Pep's already spoken about it. Will Guardiola overthink it? Will he tinker? He hasn't really done that much, has he? But if we go back to 2021, the final that everybody talks about, he left out Rodri and Fernandinho that day, didn't play with a defensive midfielder. It was only the second time in 61 games that season that he didn't play either from the start. So he has history, but it's been talked about, he's defended himself, and it looks a very stable 11 at the moment.
It looks a very stable 11 in the so-called big games. So I looked at it, you look at these last 3 big games that he's had of late. Manchester United in the FA Cup final, Real Madrid home and away. The starting 11 has been exactly the same in all 3 games. Barring the goalkeeper for the cup final, the starting 11 has been the same. The only change that he made was that Stones played as a centre-half away in Madrid when he wanted to be a little bit tighter. So those of you out there that like early value in your early goal scorers or your first goal scorers or the goal scorer markets, and you're not waiting for team selection, because we all know that odds change when team selection comes out. I think if you look at Pep's team selection, for the last 3 big games he's had, your goal scoring market there, you can pretty much be reliant on that will be his team. And looking at his team, it'll be Walker, Diaz, and then the only question mark was Akanji, whether it's Akanji or Ake as the third centre-half. Then it'll be Stones and Rodri. And then in the big games, he's played the same attacking 4. Silva, De Bruyne, Gundogan, Grealish, and obviously Haaland. So if you look at his team selection from the last 3 games, you're going to get a real insight. I don't think he'll tinker. Back to your original question, he has been known for doing that. And like you say, in the last Champions League final, probably overthought it a little bit too much. Inter Milan won't come up against this pivot midfielder that we've seen. I don't think Stones will play there the whole game because they're going to want to be defensively sound as well. But at times he will drift into that midfield. And I think with Inter Milan playing the 5 across the middle in the midfield, they're going to have to do that or else they might get overrun. Yeah,
and it almost looks like with Stones playing that position recently, they have an extra man all the time because he can jump into the back, he can go forward, and it always seems like there's just no chance of getting the ball off them.
No, it's a great position. And if you've got the players that are able to play as a right back and a centre half, as Kyle Walker is, so if they're out of possession and John Stones does drop into centre half, Kyle Walker goes out to right back, but also when he wants to go into midfield, Stones goes in and Walker tucks in. Listen, it's a position. We all know what an articulate thinker that Pep is and the way that he approaches the game and the way that he mentally approaches and thinks about it. Like you say, sometimes overthinks it. But this position that he's created with John Stones, I mean, has Jurgen Klopp copied him with Trent Alexander-Arnold or has he done it before? It looks like Pep's been the innovator, if you like, of that position. And there's a lot of people saying that he's changed football. Gradually changes, but you look at the squad of players he's got. I mean, this Manchester City team squad, they should win this, but I think it's going to be fantastic to watch. OK, let's talk about the Inter Milan side then, the tactics and the team selection for them. Inzaghi always plays a 3-5-2, as you mentioned. Always, every game this season. Most likely it's going to be a 5-3-2 for the majority if they're out of possession. But I wonder, as you mentioned, will they find joy on the wings? And the 2 up front, that's interesting as well. Dzeko or Lukaku with Martinez. Yeah, whoever plays with Martinez, that'll be different for City too. Yeah, again, those of you who like to get your bets on early, I know there's a lot of people out there that do, rather than relying on team selection. Inzaghi's pretty steady in what he does as well. Barring 1 or 2 changes, you look at the big games that he's had this season, the Milan team has pretty much been predictable. So I think from one thing going into this game, what you're looking at as a punter, as somebody looking to put your bets on, you can be pretty reliant on knowing the team selection from both sides. Quite often we go into a Champions League final that could do this, could do that, could do. From what we've seen from Pep in his last 3 and what we've seen from Inzaghi all season, the team selection is going to be pretty steady. Like you say, I think he will play 3 across the back. And there's one thing in this one that we haven't talked about, the market, the cards market. If the previous European finals that we've seen, I know we've seen West Ham, we've seen Roma with Jose, the record number of cards, the way that Inter Milan may approach this game.
The dark arts.
If you're constructive with your bets out there and you know pretty much, I could pretty much guarantee the back three for each side now, there's going to be some cards in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I'd back Inter Milan to have more than Manchester City, as in booking points, put it that way. But I think team selection, like you say, the thing that'll be interesting, Inter will play with a front two, which you don't often see in the Premier League this year. And it's not one in behind one, it is an out-and-out front two. And with Dzeko coming up against Manchester City again, it's going to be an interesting one to watch. But that's the area where you think about Pep maybe overthinking it because it's a formation that he doesn't often see. But for me, I think he'll just do what he did away against Real Madrid and just drop John Stones into that back four.
So we know how they'll line up Inter Milan, but how will they play? They're going to be out of possession for a long time. Are they just going to sit back and try and play for penalties? Are they going to have a go?
I don't think you can play for penalties. I think they'll have a go, yeah. I mean, listen, I'm looking at their results here, Sean. They beat Barcelona at home 1-0. They drew away with Barcelona 4-3. They drew with Benfica 3-3. They beat Benfica 2-0 at home. They beat AC Milan 2-0 and 1-0. So they're not a team that reliant on 0-0 draws and scraping through. They have got the attacking prowess to do it, but they will know the quality that Manchester City have got. They will invite Manchester City onto them. They will rely on smothering them in midfield to protect their back three, and they'll try and hit them on the break with DiMarco on the wing, potentially Brozovic sitting in, the ball player, playing the balls through and hitting City on the break. They have got the pace in Martinez to do that, but I don't think it'd be pretty from Inter Milan. I don't think they'll make any apologies from it. I think we'll see a very stop-start game to start, in the beginning. I think there'll be fouls, there'll be unnecessary fouls. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know off the top of my head who's refereeing, but if for you out there that want the card market, look at the referee, look at his history, look at his reputation for giving cards, because if he's a referee that has historically given cards this season, this is going to be a fixture where if he goes early in the first 1 or 2 minutes with a card, he's set a precedence and he has to do that through the whole game. I think it will be a bit of a bitty game to start with, but City will definitely dominate possession.
OK, let's talk about the potential goal scorers on the night then, because we are double delights in hat-trick heaven for the first goal scorer market. We have to start with City and with that man Haaland, who's scored 52 goals in 52 appearances so far this season, 12 in 10 in the Champions League. He's on course, goals per game, to be the all-time top scorer. He's got the best ratio already. But I had a look. He's got 1 in his last 7, Paul.
Yeah.
It's his worst run since he was 17 at Molde back in 2018. He scored 52 and 52, but 1 in 7, he's gone off the boil.
Oh, yeah, he's on a real drought, isn't he? 1 in 7. I mean, you look at his figures. You're not going to get any value backing him, are you, to score? If you score, the only value you'll get off Haaland is backing him as a first scorer.
And then potentially
double and treble, hat-trick heaven, etc. That's the only real value you're going to get if you're going to stick your neck on the line and go, right, he's going to be my first goal scorer. Backing him any time, no. I mean, 1 in 7, okay, it's a one-off game. He's always going to be a threat. There's no value in backing Haaland as an anytime scorer. For me, don't look any further than Gundogan. Look at the form that he's been in towards the end of the season, the goals that he's scored, the contributions that he's made to that team. I think you'll get a little bit of value in backing a City win and Gundogan at any time. I think he's been Pep Guardiola's better, if not best player, towards the end of the season. There's a lot of talk about whether he stays or not, the influence that he has on the dressing room. But I think you can back assists, you can back goals. I think if you back Gundogan for an assist and a goal, I don't think you'd be far off.
Just a quick word on Kevin De Bruyne as well, because I think it's interesting having a look at his record in the Champions League. He's scored 14 goals for City. 11 of them have come in the knockout stages of the Champions League. He is a man for the big occasion. However, he was criticised after that final in 2021.
Yeah, but I mean, City as a whole were criticised. But I mean, he's one of, if not the best midfielders in the world, isn't he? We know what he can do in this Premier League. His contribution to what City have done and what they've achieved is phenomenal. And I like the way that the relationship with him and Pep's come to light a little bit. He doesn't just lay down and take orders. He has an opinion. He's vocal, and I think that's him growing in stature and growing as a person as well. In the game markets that you look at, the goals, the assists. I mean, De Bruyne with the quality that he's got, the thing that I always look for is set plays. Who takes the free kicks, who takes the corners, who takes the penalties. If you're looking for a direct free kick taker around the box, De Bruyne is always going to be amongst it. You're looking for a corner taker, De Bruyne is always going to be there. The likelihood of an assist from a corner from a free kick, edge your bets and back somebody like De Bruyne for a goal and an assist, something like that.
I could tell you used to be a goalkeeper. Always looking for those set pieces. Right, let's talk about the Inter Milan players as well, the potential scorers for them. We've already mentioned that it will be Martinez first choice, then either Dzeko or Lukaku. Let's just talk about Martinez, the Bull, as he likes to be called. He scored some big goals in the quarters, the semis, the cup final in Italy. He is a big game player as well.
Yeah, huge game player. And in all honesty, he was touted around Europe, the Premier League especially, at the start of this season. I don't think it'll be long before he does come to the Premier League. I think he's an outstanding player. The thing with him, he can play in the 10 role as well. He drops in behind. Dzeko may play, I don't think he will, but he may play as a lone with him in behind. But Martinez is a huge goal threat, and he's got a good delivery of a ball as well. I think he'll be the biggest threat, the thorn in City's side. The three centre-halves that City play with will be occupied by Dzeko because he's a handful, and he'll try and occupy the centre-halves while Martinez does the damage in behind. I don't think Lukaku will start. I think he'll be on the bench. But it's the link-up play if Brozovic plays with Martinez. But yeah, I mean, we've made a case for Inter, and I think when you look at the players that they've got, that there really is the value in goal-scoring markets you're not going to get from front players. Barella, if he plays, or a set play from Inter. They're going to have fewer opportunities, you would think, in the game. So if you're looking for a goal scorer with a bit of value, if Inter Milan get a set play, a corner, a free kick, it's going in the box. Look at the centre-half, look at a Kirby, look at Bastoni.
Just a quick one on the other potential striker with Martinez, Dzeko or Lukaku. You mentioned it probably will be Dzeko. We've seen that in the Champions League. Lukaku hasn't actually started a Champions League game so far this season.
So we can pretty much say it's Dzeko then, can't we?
You would imagine Dzeko, up against his old side, as you mentioned, 7 years after leaving, he'll be determined. If it is Lukaku, even off the bench, he's got something to prove as well. Both of those two will be absolutely desperate to make their name once again in this final.
Well, it's a Champions League final, not just because of their previous history in the Premier League, but people will want to make a mark on a Champions League final. I was never fortunate enough to play in one. I can only imagine what it's like and the opportunity and the feeling you get when you play in a Champions League final. I think for Lukaku, I think he's got a lot to prove. Coming back to Chelsea next year under Pochettino, his future's very uncertain. He's gone back to Inter. It's not worked for him. He made such a big thing about wanting to go back there. He's not played as regularly as he wanted to. He's not scored the goals, and it hasn't worked for him. Dzeko against his old club City, I don't think there's any ill feeling there. I think that's a handshake and a nice to see you, good luck type thing. But with Lukaku and Mkhitaryan, with the Manchester United links for both of them, City fans won't want to see either of those two doing well.
OK, let's start to wrap things up then. Can Manchester City win the third of those trophies to land the treble at the weekend? Let's talk about how you see the game going and then ultimately your prediction.
Yeah, I think it'll be a stop-start game. I think it'll be a nervy start from both. Listen, we talk about this City machine, this rampant machine that they've swept everybody aside. The human beings, there's a lot of pressure on them. There's a huge talk about the treble, but not the treble. I think the Champions League is the biggest weight on their shoulders. Pep was brought in however many years ago it was now to bring the Champions League to City, and he hasn't done it. This is the best opportunity I think that they've ever had to do it, but to do a treble at the same time. So there's not just the weight of the treble, but the weight of the Champions League, and I think that weighs heavier on them. So they will be feeling pressure, and if Inter start well, there will be nerves there from a City point of view. I think it'll be bitty. I think Inter will try and make it stop-start. They'll try and disrupt City. City like to get into a flow, like to get into a rhythm. Inzaghi knows that, the Inter manager, and he knows how to play cup football. I think it'll be tight. I think it'll be cagey to start with. I think City's quality will eventually show through. I don't think it'll be as clear-cut as people expect. If City get a goal early, that'll be interesting. Because what we've seen Pep do in the past is send his team out in the first 25 minutes to push a team aside, go out and blow a team away, score 2-3 goals, put the game to bed by half-time. And we've seen Haaland come off at half-time when they've done that. If City go out and score 2 goals in the first 30 minutes, I think it's job done, because then Inter then have to come out and they have to attack City. They'll leave holes and they'll leave spaces. I think it'd be tight. If I was going to have a bet on the game, I'd go probably a draw at half-time, City in 90 minutes. I think that's probably, Inter will try and keep it tight for as long as they can. I can't see Inter keeping this City side out for a whole 90 minutes and taking it to extra time and pens. When City break through and they get one, I think they go on and win it and get more. My bet would be Gundogan anytime, City to win, draw at half-time, City full-time.
OK, I love this specific nature of that bet. That
I've got to get some value somewhere.
Give me some good odds. And of course, that would mean they would lift the trophy. They would win the European Cup for the first time. They would land the treble as well.
Yeah.
It would be an absolute historic moment for the club, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, where they've come from, the noisy neighbours tag, to equaling what Manchester United did with the treble. They're by far and away the best team in the Premier League at the moment. They're setting the bar. They're running away from other teams, and other teams have got a lot on to catch them next year. And you look at the squad that they've got, there's talk that they may lose Bernardo Silva, they may lose Gundogan, but the replacements that Pep seems to bring in, he seems to rejuvenate his squad every year. The other teams in the Premier League have got a lot of catching up to do. And you're looking across Europe now, and you're looking at teams that they've played, they've beaten Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. Two of the worst draws that you could potentially have. You look at what Real Madrid did to Liverpool, and all of a sudden City are, they're dealing with these sides, and they're putting themselves on a different level. And I think for them to lift this treble would be a real statement.
They are the benchmark, aren't they, in football at the moment? Manchester City, can they finally fulfil that dream of winning the Champions League and emulating their neighbours Manchester United by winning the treble? Paul Robinson certainly thinks so. Cannot wait for it to get underway on Saturday night.